All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone for joining Congressman Carson's virtual town hall. My name's Caroline. I'm Congressman Carson's communications director, and I'll be moderating this discussion. Everyone can feel free to use the chat. We got an overwhelming amount of questions submitted, which is great. We may not be able to get to all of them, but we'll address some of the most commonly asked questions. So feel free to put your questions in the chat as we go or new things come up. But Congressman, would you like to kick things off?
Yeah, I see we have people from around the city. I just saw someone from Nora. That's great. That's always exciting. First, I really just want to say thank you to everyone who has contacted our office and who is contacting other elected officials. It's very encouraging to see people who are engaged in the political process. We have received thousands of calls and messages, and I hear you. We hear you. You do not stand for the unlawful takeover of our government, and that's commendable by anyone, particularly an unelected billionaire. We've received close to 500 questions, I think, Caroline, for this town hall. So while I'd like to answer all questions, I don't think I can do it individually. So I'd like to answer some of the most frequently asked questions because a lot of the questions have been similar. And we kind of want to do some myth busting if we can. There's a lot of confusing information out there, and that's deliberate, quite frankly. You have President Trump and Mr. Musk. They're flooding the news. And, we've seen posts on the X platform, probably an average of 300 times a day. So the flow of information is deliberately overwhelming, to say the least. And listen, it's hard work to know which way to look, but that's even more reason I really believe to really get back to why we're doing what we do. The most common question I hear is, how can President Trump and Elon Musk even do this? Is it legal? And we're going to have to get more in depth on it. But the short answer is that we haven't seen anything like this before. We're facing a constitutional crisis. The founding fathers were very complicated. Slaveholders they were womanizers, of course. No one's perfect. Complicated, but yet brilliant. They set up three branches of government: the executive branch, the legislative branch, which is Congress, the House, and the Senate, and the judicial branch, the courts. And this administration, quite frankly, is deliberately ignoring Congress's laws. They're threatening to ignore federal court orders to comply with the law. They are physically locking members of Congress out of federal agencies. So my colleagues and I have attempted, some of you saw, we were attempting to enter the Department of Treasury, Health and Human Services, Department of Education, and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which was created when I served on the Financial Services Committee. During that, many of us, myself included, helped to establish the Office of Women and Minority Affairs. They don't want us to see what they're doing or to perform oversight. That's why we're there. We're not quitting. We're not backing down. Let me be clear. And Republicans hold majorities in both the House and the Senate. And I'd like to see more boldness from my Republican friends who go to work every day wanting to do what's best for our country. I'd love to see their patriotism emerge in a different way. But look, it's important to remember every member of the House of Representatives is up for reelection next year. And 33 out of 50 Senate seats are up. It's also important to note that in the House of Representatives, the chamber where I serve, we need just three Republicans to join Democrats in our fight to block these very unlawful actions, just three. So um, let's get to it. I'm looking forward to answering your questions. Caroline, where are we? Give money back to local and national. Yeah.
Oh, I'm
Oh,
so
you're muted,
sorry. I
Caroline.
was
Thank you.
muted.
Thank you,
Oh,
Candy. Thank you.
classic. I'm so sorry,
Thank you
everyone.
outside.
That is a
Especially, yeah.
classic. I should know
Okay,
better.
folks can't hear.
So the question was, how can we stop Elon Musk from accessing our private data?
Well, that's a good question. I think um, for those who don't know, Elon Musk and Doge have requested access, unprecedented access, quite frankly, from IRS, Social Security, and Medicaid and Medicare. And this has led to a lot of privacy experts to effectively sound the alarm over these very real concerns, concerns that I share. It has also resulted in multiple lawsuits in federal court to block these violations of our privacy. Now, legislatively, I just got off of a call with the Democratic caucus, and the Democrats, and we've worked to introduce a bill called the Taxpayer Data Protection Act to keep Elon Musk out of our data. And again, we just need three Republicans in the House to join us to pass the Taxpayer Data Protection Act. If three House Republicans side with us, I think we can pass this bill. But we're going to keep working to make sure it passes. And there are over 11 courts that have jurisdiction over some of these lawsuits that are being filed from birthright citizenship and other things. But Congress, we're exploring not only legislative remedies, but procedural remedies as well.
Absolutely. So another question we got a lot of is what are the courts doing about the administration's illegal activities?
Well, that's a great question. I think the legal landscape is changing very rapidly, sometimes by the hour with injunctions, temporary injunctions, and more. But there is movement and encouraging developments in the courts. There are about 64 pending lawsuits against the Trump administration's executive orders and illegal actions. For example, last week, there was a Massachusetts federal judge who issued a temporary restraining order against the Trump administration's attempt to slash medical research funding for NIH, the National Institutes of Health. And I've worked over the years to increase funding for NIH because it's a phenomenal return on investment. So if you're worried about jobs, NIH provides jobs. If you're worried about our economy, NIH generates close to $3 million in economic funding for every $1 million spent. And most importantly, if you're a parent with a sick child waiting for a medical breakthrough to save your child's life, NIH provides that last bit of hope. Now, unfortunately, because Indiana did not join this suit, research institutions in Indiana will still likely experience many of these suits, but it's good news for institutions across the country who are using NIH funding for cures like Alzheimer's, cancer, and so much more. Now, I think it's critically important to know that a federal judge has also placed a nationwide pause on President Trump's unconstitutional executive order to revoke birthright citizenship. Plus, there are at least 8 additional cases against the administration on this issue. The courts exist for a reason. Thank goodness. I thank God that our founding fathers made sure the rule of law and justice are a foundation of our democracy. And look, judges and courts are here to protect liberties and to stop unlawful actions by the government itself if necessary. And again, there's a lot happening and a lot to keep track of, but we're going to keep fighting. I'm going to keep fighting to keep Hoosiers updated in our newsletter with legal alerts so you can follow the status of ongoing litigation. That's why we're here.
Absolutely. We have a lot of questions about the status of Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. And Deborah asks, what assurance is there that seniors won't lose our health care and Medicaid?
Well, that's an important question. That's a question that we get a lot. Thank you, Deborah. First, I want to be very clear. Um, I absolutely oppose any cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. There are countless Indy residents who rely on these programs, and cuts to Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security would have to be approved by Congress in the first place and signed into law. And right now, GOP lawmakers are working on budget reconciliation packages, which include many harmful policies laid out in their master plan, Project 2025. GOP lawmakers have floated everything from Medicaid work requirements to raising Social Security retirement age to very deep Medicaid funding cuts and much more. President Trump's nominee to lead the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare, Dr. Oz, has even called for the total privatization, which I oppose, by the way, of these entities. And even more concerning is our own state's Indiana's Medicaid trigger law, which could effectively mean the elimination of HIP, which is the Health Indiana Plan, HIP. So if these proposed cuts are successful, it'll be disastrous, especially for Hoosiers. And this week, many of you have seen that the two acting commissioners for Social Security, they were forced to resign after attempting to block Elon Musk from accessing our Social Security system. Now, these I think it's important to note that whether it's a business or a local organization, a state organization, a federal organization, I think it's important to have the occasional audit. The challenge is that we can't rely on organizations to self-regulate or police themselves. That's why you have inspector generals, who President Trump has gotten rid of. And I just really think that these very reckless actions directly threaten the health, safety, and really private information of millions of Americans. And our office has heard from thousands of impacted seniors, people with disabilities, and I'm going to continue to demand answers and accountability from Elon Musk and his team's access to your and my benefits, as well as any cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. I just think it's unacceptable that there are obvious conflicts of interest. Now, Mr. Musk has done some good work with working with our Department of Defense in terms of our activity in space and suborbital flights and what he has done for our defense space. But these conflicts are too apparent. I mean, cutting off payments to everyday beneficiaries while simultaneously raking in, you know, billions of dollars, um, probably $8 to $10 million a day. I'll fact check it, Caroline. We have to fact check it from government contracts for SpaceX, for Starlink, and even Tesla. Um, it's unacceptable. So whether it's working with leaders on both sides of the aisle to vote a strong no on harmful legislation, conducting oversight to hold the Trump administration accountable, or really standing with you and so many passionate advocates out there. We appreciate our advocates and our activists for speaking out against these very apparent attacks on democracy. I'm going to keep doing everything in my power to protect Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. And so many of you have worked so hard for these benefits over the years. They are not a waste. They are not fraud. They are the social safety of our government promised to each and every one of you. And these programs provide life-saving benefits to some of the most vulnerable people in our country. And it should be off limits from any political agenda or some greedy scheme or more tax cuts for billionaires. And so let me be clear. These attempts to slash Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, they're not about saving government money. This is a very slick and deceptive trick to pay for more tax breaks for the biggest corporations. I welcome conversations about making our government spending more efficient. I think it's critically important. I think the spirit of Doge um, and what it's seeking to do is sound, but the implementation is destructive, toxic, and disastrous. I met with some folks a few days ago who worked for the FDA, and they were telling me with tears in their eyes that their colleagues had received termination letters the night before and that morning. And these are folks who've been there for quite some time. And, this wrecking ball approach, I think this approach about moving rapidly and breaking things, that's not the way to improve efficiency or make our government better. And before we get to the next question, I think it's important to know, Caroline. Caroline's our wonderful comms director, by the way. In 2022, Democrats, along with President Biden, we passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which provided more staffing, tools to enforce existing tax law that billionaires have been avoiding for years. And that has brought in millions of dollars of revenue to get back to the people. But President Trump is trying to repeal this by executive order, and it's unconstitutional. A lot of our farmers, a lot of Hoosier farmers benefited from the Inflation Reduction Act. And now they're suffering too. Add that with taking away Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, it's not saving money, but I'll always defend these programs.
Absolutely. Patrick asks, why are the prices going up? And we had some other people specifically ask about the price of eggs, which has gone up pretty significantly.
Well, too many Hoosiers are having to make, very tough choices as to whether to pay rent or put food on the table. And right now, Indianapolis is seeing the rising costs in everything from housing to auto prices to groceries and so much more. I went to several grocery stores yesterday to find eggs and I couldn't get them. I finally was able to get some from Kroger. And I think it's a particularly alarming seeing skyrocketing egg prices that commonly surpass $6, $7 in Indianapolis, in Indiana, in the 7th district. And the bird flu outbreak started in December of last year. It has sharply reduced the number of healthy birds. And as a result, eggs. This has led to a noticeable decrease in availability and really an increase in the price of eggs at the grocery store. This is also the absolute worst time for the Trump administration to freeze hiring and fire food safety inspectors and to shut down public websites with information about outbreaks or unsafe food recalls. And first, I'm demanding the Trump administration prioritize, containing bird flu in order to allow our livestock flocks to recover and also to protect uh, human health. We have 68 confirmed bird flu cases in humans so far, even even a death, according to the CDC. Secondly, I want to bring attention to the president's policies that are further driving up the cost of living for working people. President Trump's reckless tariffs and trade wars with our closest allies and neighbors will increase across the board, including on many basic goods, such as groceries. I think President Trump and his acolytes they ran on decreasing costs, but these policies are doing the exact opposite. So we're calling on our president to put the needs of everyday Americans ahead of any political agenda that will divide us. I've had several bills pass and signed into law with the help of Republicans. Many of the bills that I've had pass were signed by President Trump in his first administration. So I'm willing to work across the aisle. But this kind of chaos, all presidents are defined, their presidencies are defined by their first 100 days. But these first few days and few weeks have been chaotic, they've been toxic, and they've been disastrous, not only for our economy, but for the morale of those federal employees, regardless of party affiliation, who go to work each and every day with a sense of dignity, a sense of loyalty, a sense of patriotism. They're concerned. We've heard from folks from the Department of Labor. I just met with some folks the other day who took personal time off to talk about many of their colleagues who were proposed a buyout. They took the buyout only to get a termination letter. And many of those folks who have told me that the environment at some of our agencies is so toxic that people are just fearful. There are people in our intelligence community, in our intelligence services, who are worried about the access that they have and their names being exposed, who are in the clandestine services. There are whistleblowers who are concerned about their names being revealed. So these are very dire times.
Absolutely. Someone else asked, what is being done about the increased cost of housing in Indiana?
Yeah, well, housing insecurity is at an all-time high. We have a severe shortage of affordable housing. We're also experiencing a record number of evictions, some of the highest in the country. This has to change. I think working families who rent their homes shouldn't be at such high risk to lose the roof over their heads. You know, many of these eviction laws are state and local, not federal, but they still have to change. And at the federal level, the Trump administration, from what I understand, plans to cut about 40 to 50% of HUD's workforce. That to me is inexcusable. And just like the brutal cuts to federal housing and rental assistance programs for families, seniors, and really people with disabilities, another challenge is that new construction has kept pace with growing demand, especially for affordable housing. You know, builders, they encounter challenges such as rising material costs, labor shortages, which really limit the pace of new development. And the new tariffs will only make it worse, especially for construction materials. And this shortage has really created a demand supply gap, especially for homes priced between 200,000 and 350 to 400,000. And these are problems that need to be addressed. And adding unnecessary tariffs only exacerbates the issue.
Absolutely. We've been getting a lot of calls, and also people submitted questions for this town hall, wanting to know if Democrats can subpoena Elon Musk. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Democrats have attempted to subpoena Mr. Musk, but my Republican buddies on the oversight committee, they blocked our efforts to compel Mr. Musk to answer for his actions under oath. The Oversight Committee exists for this very purpose. It's the main investigative committee in the House of Representatives. It has the authority to investigate subjects within the committee's jurisdiction and any matter within the jurisdiction of the other standing committees. The fact of the matter is that Mr. Musk has given us more than enough reason to investigate. He's taken unprecedented action in invading our privacy based on the claim that there is massive fraud. And yes, in any system where you have human beings, there is a chance for waste, fraud, and abuse. But I think they've yet to release any real proof that shows this is the case. If there is, in fact, no wrongdoing, then Mr. Musk should have no problem facing the Oversight Committee. But instead, he's fighting accountability. Now, Democrats on the Oversight Committee, they're going to continue applying the necessary pressure to fight for full transparency. but there's also a whistleblower tip line at oversightdemocrats.house.gov. That's oversightdemocrats.house.gov. 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 And Indiana is home to over 24,000 federal workers. 24,000 federal workers. In fact, at Fort Harrison, the president's paycheck is processed right here in Indianapolis at Fort Harrison. And if you'd like to report any wrongdoing or abuses of power or threats to federal workers, you could submit it confidentially. And again, that's oversight democrats.house.gov. Oversight democrats.house.gov.
I put that in the chat as well. So
Thank you.
anybody can confidentially submit something if they work in the federal government.
Thank you.
So shifting to a topic that I know many in Indianapolis are experiencing, and we've gotten a lot of questions about this, is delays with the U.S. Postal Service.
Hmm.
So someone, Dina asks, what's going on with the USPS and package delivery? I've sent in complaints to the USPS and never hear back and have seen it all over the news.
Yeah, Dina, thank you. That's a very frustrating issue for Hoosiers. Just this week, I joined my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to basically demand the U.S. Postmaster address these delays linked to our Indy distribution hub. Now, we know these delays have real consequences for not only businesses, but for individuals. And these delays can mean a lapse in delivery of medications, financial documents, and really business shipments. That's why I'm requesting a very detailed explanation of the causes of these delays and the specific steps the Postal Service is taking to address them. In the meantime, though, our office can help with lost or even missing mail. Just uh, make sure that you have your tracking number for the missing package and call us at 317-283-6516, 317-283-6516. And we've already been able to resolve a lot of these cases for folks. We have a phenomenal team. We're a very small staff, but we have a phenomenal team from these kinds of issues to Social Security to veterans issues, from immigration issues. Folks know, they know Andrea, they know Caroline, they know Megan, they know Heather, they know Abdul, and who am I missing? Caroline,
Kathy, did you say Kathy?
Kathy, um,
Andrew.
and Drew. Drew, people rave about Drew. They love Drew. So we have a great district office. All of them are phenomenal, equally phenomenal. They're just good public servants, and honored to serve with them.
They are great. So we had several questions about DEI, and I know you've
Hmm.
personally heard from a lot of folks who say they've already been impacted by the admin's anti-DEI policies. So
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit about what you're doing to fight back that?
Well, it is Black History Month, and it wasn't very long ago that Black Americans weren't allowed the opportunity to even participate in the federal workforce, let alone other minorities, let alone women. And DEI uh, isn't race specific, even though that's been the strategy and the messaging. It impacts folks with disabilities. It impacts people from different racial and ethnic backgrounds. It impacts the Native community. It impacts the Latino community, the South Asian community, the African community, the European community, the Arab American community. It impacts Jewish brothers and sisters. It impacts Christians, Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs, Buddhists, non-theists. It impacts so many people. And so it has a particular face, and that's by design, but it provides, equal opportunities. But it's not just for individuals. It's not just good for individuals. It's good for businesses. Some businesses, unfortunately, have really doubled down on their diversity commitments, which is very unfortunate because a strong workforce is really a diverse workforce. And there is not a single industry that does not benefit from having multiple points of view, multiple experiences, and multiple backgrounds, quite frankly. It appears that our president wants to create a workforce that is loyal only to him and this very extreme agenda. Donald Trump is a very smart man. I think people tend to dismiss him, but they misread him through the lens of his pageantry and theatrics. But he's very smart. And one of the best ways I think we can fight back against these attacks is to continue pushing back against untrue narratives, pushing back against hurtful, hateful, and destructive myths and attempts to erase DEI or attempts to erase Black history, our struggle, but also Indigenous history, Latino history, parts of Ural history, Jewish brothers and sisters history, Islamic history, great Christian history, Middle Eastern history. So we have to band together as human beings, regardless of your political affiliation, to fight against this. To dismiss Black History Month is to dismiss American History Month. To dismiss any attempts at recognizing LGBTQ plus community or any minority community is dismissing the fabric of what our society is all about.
Absolutely. So a couple people wanted an update on student loans. So could you provide an
Yes.
update on that?
Yeah, I just had a conversation. A good friend of mine called me last night, and I spoke to a family who's um, who they have kids in college. So first, I think we have to look at the scale of the issue. We have over 43 million Americans who hold federal student loan debt. That was one of them, totaling almost $2 trillion. And this administration has expressed intentions to dismantle the Department of Education, aiming to transfer the responsibilities to states and other federal agencies. And this move could significantly impact federal student loan programs and oversight. And there's a lot of unknowns as it relates to the potential of these proposals. Now, the current administration has suggested eliminating the public safety loan forgiveness program, which forgives student loans for borrowers working in qualified public sector service jobs after a decade of payments. That could affect many professionals, especially first responders, especially teachers. And plans are underway to transition federal student lending to private financial institutions. And this shift could lead to higher interest rates and really fewer protections for borrowers as private loans often lack the because I know personally, they lack the flexible repayment options associated with federal programs. Now, unfortunately, my Republican friends in Congress are blocking further relief efforts, even though student debt relief would stimulate the economy by increasing entrepreneurship and increasing home ownership, which is important. The Biden administration was really pushing for broader cancellation, despite the Supreme Court's ruling against the original plan. But this is something I've been a big supporter of, having held student loan debt. And student loan debt is really holding back economic mobility and home ownership for millions of Americans. Debt cancellation and repayment reform really allows borrowers to invest in their futures, boosting local economies. I'll continue to stand for a fair and I think sustainable educational system that that just doesn't saddle students with debt. I mean, it would be great to live in a society where college is free. That is not the case. I know people like to reference other countries where these things are free, but these countries are much smaller. So it's really an unfair comparison. But I'll continue to support a higher education system that doesn't burden folks so they can't live the American dream.
Absolutely. Claudia asked, how can we help immigrants? I'll give you a second
Hmm.
to get a drink.
Thank you. Hydrate.
Yeah.
That's so important, Claudia. I mean, America's a country built on the backs of slaves and immigrants, and immigrants are what make this country America. And if I could back up just a bit, um, I think it's important to remember how we got here, and why there is an all-out attack on immigrants. There are a lot of misconceptions out there. First, there's a misconception that an undocumented is the same as illegal. That is not true. Another misconception is that immigrants are contributing overwhelmingly to violent crime in our communities. That is not true. In fact, immigrants are less likely to commit crimes. If an immigrant does commit a violent crime, they are already subject to deportation. We are a country built on due process, and everyone is entitled to a fair trial. But what is happening right now in our country is not due process. The good folks at the ACLU and the American Immigration Council, they've sued the Trump administration, arguing that they've given low-level immigration officers the power to indiscriminately deport anyone without meaningful review, like a hearing or even having a lawyer present. This is wrong. You know, breaking up families, and you're punishing people who didn't even do anything. I think it's inhumane, quite frankly. That is not to say I don't support border security efforts as a former police officer, someone who's worked in Homeland Security, someone who sits on the Intelligence Committee. Um, I certainly support stronger border security. But what we're seeing is inhumane. You know, just today, we got a report that nearly 100 immigrants who were reported to Panama had been moved to a detention camp on the outskirts of the jungle in Panama. And I've been there. And, you know, the conditions have been called primitive by witnesses, and that it looks like a zoo with fenced cages. And they're like, there are probably like 8 to 10 children there. I think it's deplorable. I really do. I think it's deplorable that our country would subject any human to these conditions, especially children. You know, the government has also prevented journalists and aid organizations from entering. One of the most important measures any of us can take is the power of information. We can all call out misinformation whenever and wherever we see it, and that has fueled and justified these very dangerous policies. We are a nation founded on the ideals of uh, our country as a safe refuge for all folks who are seeking a better life. That is American. That is purely American. And what's also American is dissent, dissenting, fighting back, speaking out, organizing, never forgetting our shared humanity. But it starts with us. It starts with you.
Absolutely. Thank you. I think that's our last question. Do you have any
Yeah.
closing thoughts you want to share with folks?
Well, good job, Caroline. I'm gonna gotta give a shout out to Team Carson. In fact, a lot of people, we've been taking calls from all over the state, with the exception of my friend Frank Mervan's office. We've been getting calls from all over the state, from different folks, from top to the bottom and east to west. I've worked in many of these counties when I worked for the state of Indiana, and they call our office for these answers, and it's just an honor. I'm a proud Hoosier, as you all know, and we have a wonderful team. It's such a blessing to have teammates who I work with in the Indy office and the DC office who it's just a great group of people. I've worked in many work environments where I've had some challenging supervisors, and to be able to work with people who really want to do what's right for the American people and just come to work with a sense of mission and purpose, it's a tremendous honor I never want to take for granted. That's why it's so heartbreaking to see so many federal workers who have been terminated and laid off because they too go to work, regardless of party affiliation, regardless of race or religion. They go to work with a sense of duty and mission, wanting to serve you and me. So I want to thank you all. Sorry I couldn't get to every question, but I want to thank you all who have contacted our office and who's trying to stay informed and stay engaged. We are fighting back. I know it's frustrating. I know it's a scary time, but I want you to know I am your congressman. I'm in this fight. Our team is in this fight. And I love you. I appreciate you. Let's talk soon. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.